right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the November 3rd Thursday Web Forum for the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, or SECAS partnership. I'm Hillary Morris. As always, I'll be your host today, and I work on user support and communications for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. SECAS hosts this web forum on the third Thursday of every month at 10 a.m. Eastern Time as an opportunity for staff to share the latest updates about the blueprint, get input and involvement from folks like y'all, and just highlight exciting science and success stories in the world of landscape conservation in the Southeast and Caribbean. So as you probably saw, I am recording this web forum just for the couple of folks who wanted to attend but had a conflict, and I will post the recording and a link to the slides on the event on the calendar for SECAS within a couple of days. So here is our agenda for today. I'll start by introducing our speaker, who will present for 30 to 40 minutes on our monthly topic. We'll wrap up with some Q&A and discussion, and then I will finish by previewing next month's webinar. We won't do any staff updates today because our whole presentation is pretty much a staff update. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce Rua Mordecai, who many of you probably know. He's the coordinator for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint, and he will be talking about what's new with the latest and greatest update to the Southeast Conservation Blueprint, which just came out about a month ago. So with that, Rua, you can go ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Hillary. Yes, it's always a fun time talking about new stuff available to everyone. So I'll give you a quick overview of some of the fun new stuff going on. Yeah, so the big push has really this year been in the Caribbean and the Gulf, which is super exciting, something we wanted to be able to do for a while. So quick reminder here. The geography of the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy covers 15 states, 2 territories, and all the U.S. waters in the Atlantic and the Gulf. So cover a pretty big area of the Southeast. Involvement from a lot of different organizations, state, federal, nonprofit, private industry as well. But y'all have heard a lot of talks about SECAS, and you're probably not here for that. You're here for talking more about the blueprint. So the big stuff the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy does, that bold vision and ambitious goal, designing the blueprint for action and clearing barriers for cross-state collaboration. And today we're going to be focusing on the new version of the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. So here is the latest version, the 2023 version. So just a reminder, we're looking at these priorities for a connected network of lands and waters across that whole southeastern area, based on a series of natural and cultural resources indicators. And collectively, all the different classes cover 50% of that southeast area for freshwater, land, coastal, marine, all that fun, tasty stuff. And that darkest purple in there, that's the highest priority that covers 10% of the geography. So we're splitting that up into different priority categories. And it's very exciting to be able to finally show this map in a way that includes detailed information of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and all of the Gulf and Atlantic waters. Very cool. Just some things. As a reminder, it's identifying potential areas for lots of different conservation actions, such as management, economic incentives, and protection. And as y'all probably know by now, it's a work in progress. We're always trying to bring in new data, input from various folks using the blueprint, and information about the on-the-ground conditions, especially as things keep changing underneath. So we're always trying to look forward, keep resilience in the context of climate change, and also update things as the landscape changes underneath us. And the idea is it's this regional perspective to be used in combination with y'all's local data and knowledge. So basically that regional lens to complement the information that y'all already have. Quick history lesson, Southeast Conservation Blueprint, which started quite a long time ago. But over time, the model really started off, and basically even in 2020 and 2021, the model was a lot like this, where we were gluing together regional plans with slightly different methods and approaches and components. So in 2020, 2021, we had all these different different plans. The little stripes are overlap zones between them. So it was a lot, and we were doing our best to kind of glue all those things together. But of course, hearing from folks that wanted to use the blueprint across the entire Gulf, across individual states, across multiple states, across big regions. So we started getting more and more folks using the blueprint in that way and wanting to use the blueprint in that way. And so starting actually in 2021, we started this path towards a more integrated, consistent approach to the blueprint. And so we knew it was going to be a lot, and so we kind of did it in 2 bites. The first bite was the blueprint in 2022, and that was where we covered this entire green area with consistent methods and approaches. So we got a lot of the land, we got a bunch of the ocean, but there were still a few other things that we knew we couldn't do all in 1 year. So this is 2022. Coverage we had for consistent methods is in that green area. We didn't even have anything for the Virgin Islands at that point, and we had some very coarse stuff for Puerto Rico. And now in 2023, finally got it all covered with consistent methods and approaches. So that's very, very exciting, and that version that's out now covers all that fun stuff. The process hasn't really changed that much from if you've seen this before, but basically we start step 1 with a series of natural and cultural resources indicators. So we have all those different layers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then we pull out highly altered areas just from that inland continental region. And then we use those indicators to rank areas within subregions across the whole geography. And after that, we add some additional connectivity by identifying corridors that link hubs around the area. And then we put it all in together to get those priority areas and corridors in the blueprint that you see now. I want to talk about a few of the new and improved indicators in 2023. We did a lot in 2023, especially because we were covering a whole bunch of new places. So now we have lots of new and improved indicators for this year, really focused in on the Gulf and the Caribbean. So we've got 18 new Caribbean indicators for land, freshwater, and marine. And a lot of the challenges and a lot of reasoning is that a lot of the stuff that we use in the blueprint on the continent is just not available in the Caribbean. So many of those classic, land cover data sets and information data sets that we rely on and the continental part of the US are just not available in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So we've also been doing a lot of kind of data advocacy and to try to get more equitable access to data sets and information down in the Caribbean that are available in other places. So yeah, we've got a bunch of new indicators in the Caribbean, and we also have 9 newer improved indicators in the continental marine area. And so that's a lot. I'm going to just show you a few of them just as fun examples, and then I'll show you where you can learn more about all the other ones. So here's one of the new ones in the Caribbean. This is Caribbean fish hotspots. And in this case, we're looking at these places where you have basically waterscapes where things like submerged aquatic vegetation and coral reefs and mangroves are all occurring in the same general area. So it's looking at, okay, where are these places where we're likely to get very high fish density and diversity based on locations of mangroves and corals and dense seagrass all present together. So this is a fun new one, and we're also part of investigating how we think about the waterscapes in the nearshore and ocean areas. Here's another example in the Caribbean. This is a landscape condition indicator. So this is actually looking at multiple scales to try to get a sense of how the landscape works. So looking at that little 30-meter pixel and then going 10 acres, 100 acres, 1,000 acres. And so this is basically looking more holistically at the landscape and seeing how altered it is. So we have these areas ranging from more natural landscapes all the way to heavily altered landscapes. So that's a new piece that we've got for the Caribbean this year. And so those darker green colors are the more natural landscapes in the area. If you are familiar with this area, you recognize things like El Yunque up here, a lot of the protection in Vieques. St. John as an island has a lot of great, big national park covering most of the island. So that's some cool stuff. Another new piece we had, just based on some feedback of early workshops and components, is a reforestation potential indicator. This was another interesting one, and it's looking at, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, everywhere in the Southeast, but there's a lot of opportunities that came up in the Caribbean for reforestation in places that should have trees. In that areas, especially after the different hurricanes and FEMA and emergency response pieces. And so we wanted to make sure that was an important part of the blueprint, how people could look at things. So some of these lighter peachy colors, those are looking at places that could have potential based on being sort of pasture or crops, or also kind of urban open spaces. So spots where you might be able to get more trees where they would logically be. And then we have other components in here that are looking at important places for coffee production. And so we could maybe get shade coffee or sun coffee into more shade coffee production. And then also takes into account the water supply, reservoirs and watersheds. So you're getting higher points if you are in a water supply reservoir. So that's a huge, as we all know, making sure we've got more natural systems in some of these reservoirs in these watersheds is pretty important for drinking water and human health. And also, especially in some of these mountain areas in the central part of Puerto Rico, the reservoirs tilt up really, really quickly when you start clearing things for agriculture and other purposes. So those are major targets. And also, these are important places of linking and connecting big conservation hubs in this area. So that's a new cool thing we've got in Puerto Rico. Now let's talk a little bit about some ocean ones. And so in this case, this is marine highly migratory fish. This was a fun one. And this is basically looking at the most important places for two species of tuna and blue shark, and looking across multiple life stages for them. So it's looking across the times when they're in juvenile and spawning habitat and adult feeding habitat and foraging, those kind of components. So like we've done with a lot of the other marine indicators that have multiple species and multiple life stages, we basically use a program called Zonation to identify this sort of portfolio of places that are going to be most important for that collective set of species across all the different months and across all the different life stages. So those darker colored areas are the ones that are most important for bluefin tuna, skipjack tuna, or blue shark. And a lot of this is based on currents and kind of highly productive hotspots. This is the first time we've actually gotten a marine indicator that covers the deeper ocean that includes the Atlantic and the Gulf. This is actually even a global data set, so interesting stuff. Another new one we have is the Gulf Sea Turtles indicator. So this is just in the Gulf, but it's looking at important for sea turtle index species across the larger area. So same thing, we're trying to make sure we're capturing important areas for 4 different sea turtle species across the entire Gulf, and making sure we have important places for them during different times in their life history. So you can see, some of these areas, you recognize some important parts for sort of loggerhead sea turtles in some of these sections, some important parts for Kemp's Ridleys along the area. So we're trying to make sure that we've got that suite of different species during different times of the year incorporated here. So the Gulf Sea Turtles, this is a new one. This comes from the new GoMaps models that came out fairly recently. So always trying to grab the latest stuff. And here's another one, and I zoomed in a little close to this one that we've updated, this Atlantic coral and hard bottom indicator, because of one of the things we were able to do this year, which is better incorporate deep sea coral, cold water coral mounds off the Blake Plateau. This has always been a challenge in how we capture important areas for coral and hard bottom. And so these kind of little areas right in this center are all based on some work from Derek Sowers and others. These are the latest information on important cold water coral mounds in the Blake Plateau. So that was one of the big improvements we did in that. We did lots of improvements in integration and ocean stuff and Caribbean stuff this year. Really minor stuff on land, just fixing some issues and bugs and various other things. But we did a lot of stuff out in the ocean. And so it's very cool. Blake Plateau and cold water corals are very high conservation importance and have always been a challenge to tackle. So great getting the latest data and information into that. All right, so for those that were at the workshops where we did the early version of the taking a look at the 2023 draft of the blueprint for the Caribbean and the Gulf and Atlantic Oceans, we were able to fix a whole bunch of different issues and address a lot of different comments. So we were able to get about 40% of the workshop issues that came up fixed in the final blueprint. And that was the case in the Gulf and Atlantic, also the case in the Caribbean. I think it was like 43 and 45 or something like that. But very, very close. This is just a little screenshot looking in it. Here's all the comments in St. Croix. Here are the final known issues that are left that we weren't able to address with the final blueprint. So as many of you have heard, we're completely obsessed with capturing known issues in the blueprint and constantly working on them. So if you were in any particular blueprint workshop and you went in and you circled the tiniest little pond or small area and pointed out some issue we were under prioritizing or something or missing it, we do go through all those different comments. We hold on to them. We look back at them over multiple years. And we have systems for sort of, did we address it? Is it still there? So when we go back, if you think about this area of St. Croix and we're looking at what we fix for the next year, we have broader known issues, but we also have very specific places that we can take a look at that looked good in the past, but also places that need a little work. So yeah, that's actually pretty consistent across a lot of the workshops. We're able to fix a lot of stuff from the draft. So big thank you for everyone that was on the workshops, because the spatial comments and information you provide is really, really helpful, especially when we're covering such a big area. Another big thing this year, if y'all haven't heard yet, is there's now a Midwest Conservation Blueprint. We're working really closely with the Midwest Landscape Initiative, kind of a sister initiative to SECAS in the Midwest, and to help them tightly integrate that work with the Southeast Blueprint. And so basically, if you're moving back and forth, if you're in the Southeast, but then you need to start crossing into the big sections of the Midwest, and you need to make some decisions across bigger areas, the experience, the language, the wording, the approaches, all this stuff should be very familiar to you if you're using the Midwest Conservation Blueprint as well. So they're designed to seam up, not just in information and all that stuff, but also even in language and approaches. So that's really exciting. This is the 1.0 version of this, got released last month. And so they're constantly doing amazing stuff. So that's great for any of you that maybe need to go a little bit outside of the Southeast. All right, now accessing blueprint data. So there's some, as usual, there's some cool places to get some of this data and information. I'm sure if you haven't looked at it already, you're like, ooh, I want to see what the new fun stuff is. So there's a few different places, but I'm going to just take you on a quick adventure through the SECAS website so you can see where some of the cool stuff is. So that's where we're going next. On an adventure to the website. Okay, so this is the website, secassoutheast.org, and I'm in the blueprint page here just to show you a couple of the fun things you'll be able to see. So in the blueprint itself, one nice thing, if you're intimidated by all the different indicators and you just want a quick little cheat sheet, at the very beginning here, we have a little link to, right here, a suite of natural and cultural resources indicators on the blueprint page. So if you click on that, you get this really pretty little, we always call it like a cheat sheet. And it has an overview of all the different indicators with just a real quick, like, what is it and where do the data come from? What's the data source and what is it trying to do? So I've got this nice little cheat sheet here for all the 61 natural and cultural resources that are in the indicators now. So it's nicely sorted by continental, the ones terrestrial, freshwater, coastal and marine, and then the Caribbean ones are out on a nice little page. So if you just want the quick menu of what's here with the shortest overview we could do while still giving you data source information and stuff like that, that is here. So that's just on this little link talking about Sweden Natural Cultural Resource Indicators. So that's fairly fun. We have a couple of different things. The Blueprint Explorer, which I'm going to talk about in a second, because we're very, very close to updating that with the new version of the Blueprint. There was a few complications given the new areas we were covering, but we were super close. Like it might just even be a day or two before we're ready to release that. But I will start in the Atlas. And so the Blueprint Atlas is more of your classic sort of web mapping atlas that you might be used to seeing. We've got lots of fun stuff in here. Quick start map, the documentation. So this is the Blueprint development process, and even things like changelog, which we'll do over time to see how things have changed. So development process has all the gory details of how everything came together. So if you want to dive into that, that's right there. And then we have the Blueprint priorities, all the subregions, and then all the different indicators. So if you just want to kind of cruise around and look at them individually, this is one way to take a look at them, just one by one. So we have all these fun indicators you can take a look at. And then also we have a few other pieces, the combined prioritization results. So we bin the Blueprint into these categories: high, highest, and medium, and all those other pieces. But underlying that is a continuous analysis that we pull. And so we have that available. The hubs and corridors, if you just want to look at the hubs and corridors layer, that's in there. Some different threats layers: sea level rise, offshore wind turbine threat, land-based wind turbine, solar, a bunch of other fun layers in there. So that's all there if you want to take a look. There's also, if you want even the more classic kind of map experience, at the very top, there's this little quick start map, which is a nice way. Oh, you can also download the data. So if you just want to grab the GIS data, you don't want to see all this stuff, easy. We got this fun little quick start map. So if you just want, again, like I said, the classic sort of experience of looking at all the layers and indicators, it'll load up here, show you the little legend with the Blueprint and all that stuff. But then if you click on the layers, this little kind of stack square thing, you can get all the different information that's in there too. So if you want to look at the Blueprint itself, or if you want to look at any of these indicators, you can turn off the Blueprint and look at any of these indicators, and they're all sort of sorted. So if we want to look at some of the marine indicators we just talked about, you wanted to see that Gulf sea turtles indicator, well, here it is. So you can grab any of those in a nice little quick start map if you want to look at them, overlay, look for more information, all that fun stuff. So this is all here in the classic style mapping interface you have. And then giving you a glimpse into the future, this is the test platform of the Blueprint Explorer. So this is a few of you have seen some of the different features of this piece where you can summarize information, you can look at point data. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. I'm not going to talk about all that today, but I will highlight one of the things we've been working hard on, which is filtering the Blueprint. So this is something that will be loaded with the new version of the Blueprint very, very soon, just to give you a little preview. So this allows you to say, okay, we've got all this Blueprint priority. Well, how do I find my part of the Blueprint? It's a whole lot of stuff. Where do I find the stuff that aligns with the places and decisions and stuff that I want to do? So we can go in and take a look at, say, well, now we've got some slick things set up that you can, we have all these different indicators, remember, all these different pieces, but that's a lot to kind of go through. But say I want to go and I'm zooming into the Caribbean here, for an example. Now the filter is just going to show me stuff that's relevant to the area that I'm looking. So these are just the Caribbean indicators now. So now I've got this Blueprint priority I'm looking at. And so now I might want to ask some questions, right? So maybe I'm doing some work and I care a lot about some of the, maybe I care a lot about some of the fish, and I'm working on what can I do on land to help some of the important sort of marine fish species that were out there. So I might look and say, okay, well, let me start with looking at some of the fish nursery habitat. So I can click on Caribbean fish nursery habitat, boom. Now, these are just the parts of the blueprint that, in this case, are fish spawning nursery or other concentration areas across this area of Puerto Rico here. So now I've seen, okay, now I've got those areas. And so, all right, now I'm starting to simplify things. But now I may be looking at something like, okay, but I also am doing, working on reforestation efforts. So I can come in and say, add this Caribbean reforestation potential. And now it's just showing me places where there's reforestation potential, but also fish nursery habitat. So we can do a lot of these, they're kind of and filters. So we can look at these places that have multiple things going on in the process. So that's, we're really excited about that piece and being able to do those different components. And that's something you can do anywhere in the blueprint for all these different pieces. So we can scoot over here. Now we can go back to the ocean and we can say things like, all right, here we are out in the Gulf. Maybe you're working in the water and you want to say, all right, let me look at those places that are important for Gulf sea turtles. Okay, so I can grab some of these more important areas, be as restrictive as I want, and then say, okay, but I want places that are important for sea turtles and Gulf marine mammals. And so now I can start looking at some of these places, you know, looking at the tops of the tops where they're particularly important for both Gulf sea turtles and marine mammals as we look at those spots. So you can do a lot of really fun, adventurous things with that. A few other nice things you can do, or we'll be able to do in a few days. You can also filter by other parts. So if you just want to look at, say, just show me the hubs and corridors of the blueprint, you can just look within the hubs and corridors of the blueprint. And you can do fun stuff like, well, show me the hubs and corridors, but also just let me see the ones that have some of the higher likelihood of urbanization at a certain point in time. So now I can start looking at where are those hubs and corridors that are most threatened by different levels of development. So I can start putting those different pieces in here and mix and match, explore. Hillary.
Yeah, I got a question in the chat, a request to look at the Western Gulf. Do we have time to kind of zoom into the Western Gulf and show an example? Thanks for that question, Donna.
Yeah, no problem. Let me go into the Western Gulf up here. Yep, so we have the western part of the Gulf on this section. And for any of these, again, we have all our marine components, so we can look at, let's see, what do we want to look at here? We can also pull up some sea turtle areas that might be, that overlap with a lot of some of the key. So now I've pulled up the Gulf coral and hard bottom areas. And so I can look at interactions between some of the hard bottom and information that we have in there as well. But really, you can play around with all the different components in this if you want to do some of the filtering parts. Something else I didn't mention, which is also really fun, is anytime, this is the interactive filtering component. But at the same time, we can also, if you just have a particular area you're interested in, you can always upload a shapefile and it will make a really sweet report with maps of all the indicators and numbers, all kinds of good stuff. Yeah, we can pull up like marine highly migratory fish and look at some parks that are particularly important for those highly migratory fish that also intersect with some of the places that are important for sea turtles, and see where some of those pathways start happening. So yeah, lots of fun stuff to play with. And as we usually mention, these are great opportunities. If you have any feedback or thoughts as you're filtering down and looking at some of these spots in any ways, and you see something that you didn't expect or didn't make as much sense to you, please let us know, because that helps us with looking into different ways we can improve the blueprint and the viewer experiences and all that other stuff. So yeah, that is your quick tour / adventure around the latest version of the Conservation Blueprint. I think, Yeah, I did show a version of this on land as well. You can also, just for clarity here, you can also look at what data is underneath these individual points too. So if I want to look at some spot and I see this little speck out here and I'm like, oh, why is that? What's going on with that? I can go into the different indicators and then I can see, oh, I see this little area right here is coming out because there's confirmed hard bottom associated species over here. And it's got some good predictions of Gulf deep sea coral richness and is pretty good for Gulf marine mammals. But you can sort of look at some of these spots and see what's underneath. So you can view the point data. And another thing that we've modified for this year is that the data summary view, we've kind of used the same hexagons that GoMaps uses, and these are aligned with the mammal and turtle models as well. So you can click on the summarized data, and if you want to see things in summary units, it's watersheds as you're up here on land. So if you're thinking about land, you've got particular HUC 12s, and you can do all this stuff with indicators and threats and changes within those watersheds. And then once you get into the ocean, then you're into the hexagon. So I might click on this hexagon and it tells me, oh, there's some information for these species. This tells me what it does for sea turtles. This gives me some of the information for the highly migratory fish. So it basically works. Once you go into the ocean, you'll go in hexagon land. Once you go on land with these, then you'll go into HUC 12 watershed summary. So this is nice, especially if you work in watersheds, to give you some nice little summary modes. And what other fun things was I going to mention? Oh yeah, on land, we also have some information on some of the, a quick link to a search that will give you land trusts that are close to that watershed as well. So yeah, lots of fun data, lots of fun information. I just wanted to give you all a taste of what you can do with the new information in this year's blueprint. And as always, you can also contact Blueprint user support like Hillary to help you. So we try to make sure sometimes people like to do stuff on their own and explore. We want to make sure you all have that opportunity. But if you get stuck or you're like, oh, I'm interested in this, but I wonder if someone could help me out with just making some maps or figuring out ways I could use the blueprint, feel free to reach out. You all know Hillary on this one, but we have all of our staff sort of listed and their different specialties as well for blueprint user support. So they're all there. It's their whole job just to help you out and help you use the blueprint. Yeah, that's my quick introduction to this year's blueprint.
So much, Rua. We've had some good chatter going on in the chat, suggestions and ideas for data to look at. Aranza Sue asked a good question about using the filtering in the viewer to drill into mangrove habitat. And Alex made a good point that I just want to highlight, which is that if you want to filter the blueprint by something that's not offered out of the box in the viewer, it's not one of our indicators, that's exactly the type of thing that user support can help with. So if you want to find the piece of the blueprint that aligns with something that's not in the underlying blueprint priorities, then you can't do the filtering automatically, please reach out to us because we can help you kind of narrow down the part of the blueprint that aligns with your question, with your organization's mission, with what you're trying to accomplish, and kind of do some custom stuff for you. So as Rua said, that's the whole point of why we're here. That's the whole point of our job, and it's totally free. So
yeah, and we do have mangrove specific layers. We work with compared what we had with Steve Schill from TNC, just to confirm that, because he does a lot of the Caribbean mapping over there, and he's like, yep, this is the best layer to use. It's actually better than some of the stuff they had for that area, so that was good. So we have a decent mangrove layer that user support can help you out with. We also, it's something we made some progress on. We'll see if we get there into the future. We're also working on a mangrove migration model, working with Steve and the TNC folks. Which is another thing. We'll see how that goes out in the future, but we have been kind of working on that as well, related to mangroves.
So I'll just pause and we can open the floor for questions. It's a pretty manageable group, so if you just want to hop off of mute and ask a question, feel free, or you can type them into the chat. I'm going to do Sandra's from the chat, and then I'll go to Jason. Sandra said, this is amazing work. How do you anticipate drilling down on the local level and integrating local knowledge? Rua, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways we do that. One of it is through working with a lot of users that are working in small parcels, smaller landscapes, local governments, and various other groups, just to make sure it's like the check on the regional information. So the more we can capture with regional consistent information, the better. So we're always working with that to make the blueprint stuff better. But the other piece is what Hillary said, is that we have user support folks that can help you combine the blueprint with your local information. So one of the things that a lot of folks that do, sometimes it's simple. It's just we need to summarize the blueprint in a way that's not easy, and we put it together. But oftentimes when folks have that local information that we're not able to capture at this regional lens, that's one of the cool things for user support. I mean, do it for free, it's part of our job, but they'll work to say, okay, you have this local data on here. How can the blueprint complement that information and help working on, okay, let's put some maps that combine that local information you have with the appropriate parts of the blueprint in a single integrated way. Because as y'all know, part of the problem sometimes nowadays is not a lack of information, it's a lack of how to easily put it all together in a way that makes sense, that's not a hot mess. So that's another key. We want to make the regional stuff as good as possible, but we know that's not always going to work. Sometimes there's just really good local information. So it's helping folks put together their local information with the blueprint is a key part of that.
Yeah, thanks, Rua. Rua alluded to the workshops that we had this May as well, where we really got experts in the Caribbean and the Gulf and the Atlantic and the areas that we were updating this blueprint together to kind of beat up the draft and say, hey, these are the places that are over prioritized. These are the places that are under prioritized. These are the places that look good. Make sure that they don't change. And then we as staff kind of go back to the drawing board and come up with what tweaks we can make to the indicators, what tweaks we can make to the blueprint methods to better reflect what experts really know conditions are like on the ground or in the water, as the case may be. And that's kind of part of that annual revision cycle and trying to iteratively improve the blueprint over time based on the feedback we're getting through things like workshops and indicator teams and what we're learning from the users that we're actually working with to apply the blueprint to their grants and their decisions and their conservation plans. But since this is kind of our first attempt at consistent methods and indicators, especially in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, I'm sure that there are things that we've missed. Rua said that we were able to solve 40% of the known issues that were identified at workshops in the final version. But if you all see things that don't make sense to you, that aren't consistent with your local knowledge and what you really know about the landscape, we would really, really welcome that feedback, because we'll just keep refining and keep improving as time goes on. Mm-hmm. Jason, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? I see your hand.
Well, thank you. And first, I just wanted to congratulate you on this really amazing work. It reminds me of things I was exposed to many years ago, like Chicago Wilderness, where a consortium of local governments was working on kind of integrated resource management using the green infrastructure concept to identify hubs and corridors and all those things necessary to maintain movement of individuals, water, genetic material across the landscape. But now you're doing this on just a vast piece of the planet. So congratulations. And my first question is, to what extent, I should say I'm from Ecological Services in headquarters, and that's kind of relevant to my question. To what extent has this information so far been used by our Ecological Services field office network in helping guide mitigation decisions? So clearly there's, direct utility for identifying priority areas for avoidance, that first step of our mitigation hierarchy, but then also there's potential areas for focusing our compensatory mitigation recommendations, or when we make a compensatory mitigation requirement, we could drive those recommendations to a key location in a hub or a corridor. So I was just wondering what the kind of uptake or integration in our field office activities has been to date.
Yeah, maybe Hillary and I will split this one on the user support one. I do know we have some good examples of ecological services at more smaller scales, looking at some of those opportunities, and a few at bigger settlement pieces, where you have these big settlements and you're looking for opportunities for sort of mitigation and conservation. And then I think there's another scale of work where, at least in the Southeast, I know the Fish and Wildlife Service in general is one kind of user of the blueprint, has been really interested in these kind of collective landscape discussions around big, large sections of states, and identifying these sort of like, okay, where are the white spaces where there could be good, where there's high development, where can we help kind of direct development over here? Where are some good opportunities for like conservation where we have high conflict, but are going to be really important parts of the network? So I think there's another high level use that's happening more with the blueprint, and thinking about like, okay, we've got these big growing areas. Where are the places that are like the white spaces? Where are the spots that might be more important? And what's the stuff in between? But doing that not at an agency by agency level, but doing it as in a collective partnership and places like that. So I think that's one example on that front. Hillary, do you have a better sense on the different ecological services? We're at this point where we have so many user support people.
Yeah.
I can't track all our uses anymore.
Yeah, if anybody else would like to weigh in from the user support team is on this call, please feel free. I'm not aware of any super explicit examples of exactly what you have described. A lot of our stronger examples in using the blueprint for kind of priority areas to avoid has been around renewable energy siting, and Christine Willis, who I believe is with Ecological Services, who's been really active in that space and a real advocate for using the blueprint in that way. We've also done some work with, I know, the Mississippi Ecological Services field office on aquatic planning, though I think there was some turnover with that project and I'm not exactly sure where it panned out. But the blueprint is a layer in IPAC for what that's worth, and can be kind of used to inform. We updated them, and hopefully it's been updated to the 2023 version within IPAC. But I think that that's an area where we could really grow in how we're supporting the Fish and Wildlife Service. A lot of our more in-depth work within the Fish and Wildlife Service has been through refuges and helping inform boundary modifications, boundary expansions, habitat management plans, environmental assessments, land protection plans. We've done a lot with refuges, but I think there's a lot of room for us to grow in how we support ecological services. I think actually the blueprint was used in some budget allocation work within ES. Yeah. So I'd really welcome your ideas. I loved what you were suggesting about kind of using the blueprint in mitigation planning. And I hope that you'll reach out kind of offline that we could talk more about that.
Sure. Yeah. And that's all really exciting. If you figured nationally, we do 10,000 informal consultations and 1,000 formal consultations. The Southeast is big numbers in that mix, but then also reviews under so many of our other authorities, where all this information could be brought to bear. And my last question, and then I'll jump off, was relevant to your IPAC point. I'm glad to hear that's been integrated. I was going to ask just about ecosphere generally, so is that being served up as a layer in ecosphere? Do we have right now our new system for tracking our project reviews has a pretty robust mapper and allows people to see, well, where were the last 10 reviews that my field office did of a similar type of project or in a certain geography, and just being able to switch this on in that environment as well could be valuable.
I'm not sure whether it's an ecosphere or not. If you know the contact to reach out to, though, we would love to talk to them about whether that's something they want to incorporate.
Okay, I do. Yeah, just off the top of my head, Tara Nicolason is the key individual.
Okay.
But thank you for everything. I'll drop off. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your great questions. Emily, did you have anything to add? I see you've popped your camera on.
Yeah, I'll just mention really quickly, Jason. I'm Emily Grandstaff. I'm based in Tennessee, and I do Blueprint user support for the Southern Appalachian region, and I'm co-located with the Tennessee Ecological Services field office, and I come from ES in the Partners program too. And my husband is the stream and wetlands mitigation banker. So within our household, we've had a lot of conversations about integrating, these types of planning efforts into like IRT decision making processes. And, it's a big, kind of question. And I think kind of looking through like the Corps of Engineers districts to sort of integrate this, I think would be helpful. But and I'll also mention too, within ES, we've had a lot of conversations about the blueprint coverage of critical habitats, designated critical habitats. And last year we did a quick analysis of the 2022 blueprint to designated critical habitats, and it's covering like 94% of the habitats. So there's a lot of alignment, when it comes to recovery efforts for species. And I think there's like Hillary said, I think there's a lot of opportunities to, think about ways of compensatory mitigation efforts with it too. So happy to be involved in that conversation if it comes up.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that, Emily. Armanta Sue, I see your hand next. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Hillary, and thank you, Rua, for the nice overview. I have a question about, this is more related to sort of outreach and engagement plan that you have for the blueprint. Because I just want to see, like, we have so many tools and visualizations at NOAA alone. So how can we promote yours as well? And I'm especially thinking because I'm so on the ground in the Caribbean, right? And I'm thinking about the National Estuarine Research Reserves. I'm thinking, so protected spaces that are not just federal, but could be territorial. How do we promote the blueprint, or is there a strategy plan that you have? Because in a short amount of time, I have to think quickly about what's the best tool to share with them, right? And now we've got the National Climate Assessment, which is a whole nother amazing set of things, and they've got their own, I don't know if you know, but they've got their own atlas now that just got released on Esri. The other thing, as you know, there's so much money going out the door right now through BIL and IRA funding, right? Through fisheries, through our office, through the climate program office, and everyone's promoting their own tools. So how do we help? And I'm not just talking about state agencies and federal agencies. I'm talking about small NGOs that are trying to make the linkages to other connected spaces who, their capacity is very limited. So I guess, what are your plans and thoughts for that particular audience who are going to be launching large amounts of money in the next 4 or 5 years?
In the Caribbean, we've helped kickstart this community of practice that's bringing together a lot of conservation practitioners kind of across all sectors and levels of decision making. We're working with the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center on that, and kind of reinvigorating a community that existed kind of through the Caribbean LCC. And so that has been a really fantastic group to kind of get the word out in the Caribbean and then make sure that we're up to date on the best data and the best feedback from those folks working on the ground. There are a few examples of how the blueprint has been used to help guide where those big funding sources get spent: America the Beautiful, Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And kind of helping steer that money to projects that really need it. And I think the blueprint can be a little bit of a unique niche among that sort of tool saturation that we've reached, in that it's really kind of bringing the conservation community together. We have the more than 2,000 people from 500 organizations who have their fingerprint on that plan. And so in terms of informing spatial decisions about where conservation can happen on the ground or mitigation can happen, I think it brings that sort of the conservation community speaking with one voice behind these priorities, and having that user support available to really help people make decisions, I think is a little bit unique. There's so many tools out there, but fewer of them actually have dedicated capacity that can help people apply them. And so I think that's a strength of the blueprint. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Rua.
I mean, the other piece is the discussion about IPAC and Ecosphere is a really good one too, where we're spending a lot of time trying to get the blueprint information in the tools that people are using. So it's not like, oh, there's another tool here, idea. So if there's kind of like and we've been, they're in a bunch of different other agencies' pieces, but the concept here is that, like you said, Aranzazu, the hope is that instead of promoting the blueprint as like, okay, there's this tool and there's this tool, there's this tool, but is there like, if there's a go-to system where NOAA folks or some of the nonprofits or folks are going, then the blueprint can be part of that tool. People can use the all the fun stuff we have over here, but we want to make sure that it's available in the flow, the tools, whatever people are already using that's customized for their particular questions. If you have a nice restoration dashboard that people are using on projects, let's try to get the blueprint in as a layer that can help them in that context. And if they need to go deeper, there's user support. Hillary has a big long list of all the things that blueprints in, so we can make sure as things get updated and that everything handshakes. But I think the future of all these tools is less about sending everyone to every individual thing. There's a role for all those are important, but also making sure that you can go to whatever your tool is and grab that information in the context that's already customized for your decision. So we want to make sure that it's not, I got to use 7,000 things to make this decision. It's like, oh, here's my tool, whatever an organization wants to have, and the information you need comes into it in the way that you want to see it.
Yeah, Rua. Yeah, I think that's spot on. Yeah, I'd love to see how I can connect you folks to our geospatial division chief for Digital Coast. And they have a whole screening process of how they decide this kind of thing. But I would love for you to make sure that they know and see if we could link it in there, because that's a
fantastic suggestion.
Congressional mandate. I think it happened under the Trump administration, actually. That required NOAA to put together a repository for all digital coastal resources. Awesome. So I think that's a great idea. The other thing that's happening, you probably know this, there's both of our entities are planning a NOAA in the Caribbean meetings in March. So we're trying to see how we can consolidate and collaborate to kind of make that a unified visit in March for Caribbean, because that would be, I think, a really great place to promote the blueprint. So
yeah, definitely.
Thanks for that suggestion, Aristu. Yeah, if you want to send an email and copy me to whoever it would be the best contact, as Yvonne has said in the chat, we make the map service for the blueprint available, so it should be extremely straightforward. It sounds like there's a screening process and some questions we'd need to go to, which makes complete sense. But if they do decide that the blueprint is appropriate, it would be pretty easy to pull it into any online mapping platform. Awesome. So far, the blueprints in the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, the Climate Adaptation Knowledge Exchange, Landscope, I think of IPAC I mentioned. I'm trying to think of a few more off the top of my head. The Southeast Regional Partnership for Planning and Sustainability, we're kind of working on the intersection of working lands and military mission preservation. It's in there. So I really appreciate what you said, Rua, that's definitely a huge way that we're kind of trying to embed the blueprint in other people's things, so they don't always have to come to us, because meet people where they are and using the tools that they're happy with.
Awesome.
Alex, did you have a comment you wanted?
Yeah, just really quickly, I wanted to kind of reemphasize that, as you mentioned, Aranzazu, you're on the ground and, you've already been such a huge champion for us in developing the blueprint in the Caribbean, but that feedback is so huge. Now that we actually have a product, we get to start improving on it. So, as we start getting into our revision cycles, I think that's where folks like you are going to be so critical in helping us make sure that as new data comes online, we are incorporating that into our future updates and, capturing all of those good places that we need to make sure we're getting.
Any other questions? I think we might have time for one more if anybody wants to jump in, and then I'll just wrap up. All right, I'm not hearing any. I counted to 15. So I'm going to wrap up just by saying that the December Third Thursday Web Forum will be canceled. It's really getting close to the holidays, and I know a lot of people are out of town that time of year. So we'll be getting back together on the 16th of January. Oop, and I've got the year wrong, 2024. I'm already signing my checks with the wrong date. So yes, January 16th, 2024, we will be hearing from the staff of the Atlanta Botanical Garden, who'll be presenting on the new southeastern plant regional species of greatest conservation need, or RSGCN list. That was just released recently, and it's the nation's first list of regional species of greatest conservation need specific for plants. So a bunch of state and regional experts worked together to create this list. They were factoring in the distribution, the status, the threats, the conservation needs for all of these plants across the Southeast that are listed in state wildlife action plans as species of greatest conservation need. So there's a lot of really exciting applications for this list to promote long-term conservation of imperiled plants in the Southeast. And so we're really excited to hear from the team who worked on this project about all of the great tools and resources that they have available. And then, as always, I like to end on this slide on how to get more involved in SECAS. Easiest thing to do is just to join our newsletter. You can sign up on the footer of any page of the SECAS website, secassoutheast.org. And that will get you signed up for our monthly newsletter, as well as a monthly reminder email about this web forum. You can always connect with your SECAS staff. Rua showed that page. You can reach out to user support, or contact information's all there. You can see what partners are participating in SECAS governance on the partners page, and then obviously explore the blueprint and let us know how it's working for you. If we can help support a grant, a conservation plan, a decision, we would love to help. And if you have feedback on how we can improve the priorities as part of our revision cycle, we would love to hear from you. So that's really all I have, and I will just pause again to see if any questions have occurred to folks in the meantime. All right, not hearing any. Everybody enjoy the rest of your morning and have a great weekend, and happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate, and appreciate you all tuning in. We hope we'll see you in the shiny new year. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye, everyone.